Hey developers, welcome back to our channel. Today we are discussing top 50 Spring Boot interview question and answer for 2026. Whether you are a fresher or an experienced Java backend developer, this video is one stop guide to cracking Spring Boot interviews. Stick around till end because the last 10 questions are absolute killer questions that top tech companies are asking in 2026 interviews. And yes, all examples are ready to use code snippet you can try while watching. Let's start with very first question. What is Spring Boot? So Spring Boot is an extension of Spring Framework. Its main purpose is to simplify application development, removing the need for complex XML configurations. Nice. How minimal this is. Interview tips. Don't just define it. Explain why it's faster and simpler than traditional Spring. Next question. Why is Spring Boot preferred? Companies love Spring Boot because it reduces development time and is production ready out of the box. For example, instead of manually setting up servers and beans, Spring Boot auto configures them. You can run any Spring Boot app with just one command. For example, mbn space spring-boot :run. This is exactly the type of real-world answer interviewers want. Next. What is the difference between Spring versus Spring Boot? A very common interview question. So traditional Spring, manual configuration and external server deployment. Coming to Spring Boot, it's a auto configurations. So we no need to do any manual configuration, just we need to provide few annotations. Automatically Spring Boot will auto configure. And next, embedded server. So we don't need any external deployment server. So automatically just we need to add one dependency. Automatically our Spring Boot will deploy into embedded server. Nice. How much easier it is? Interview will love you if you can explain this difference consistently. Okay. Now let's understand how Spring Boot works internally. So when a request passes through dispatcher servlet will send the request to controller. From controller, it will send to service and repository. So here key components: starter dependency, auto configurations, and embedded server. So you can just explain one mini example from your project. Let's suppose you are developing one order management service. Okay, so first you can define your all the starter dependencies, just then you can provide your annotations, and then just you can add one dependency from your form.xml file. Just you can run your application, just try to hit from the browser, automatically will request goes to your dispatcher servlet, then again it will go to controller, then again it will go to the service and repository. Okay, now what is starter dependency? So starter dependency pull in all necessary libraries automatically. For example, the web starter includes Spring, MVC, Tomcat, and Jackson. So interviews love when you mention this, avoids versions, conflicts, and simplify builds. Next, what is auto configuration? So auto configurations creates bean automatically based on the class path. For example, if MySQL driver is exist, Spring Boot creates a data source bean automatically. Explain this an interview as a time-saving feature. Coming to @Spring Boot application. So this annotation is very common in interviews. So, okay, let's understand what is at the rate Spring Boot application. This annotation is the entry point of our application. So it's combined at the rate configuration, at the rate enable auto configuration, and at the rate component scan. Say this confidently in interviews. It shows you understand the framework from scratch. Next, what is embedded server? So, Spring Boot comes with an embedded server, usually Tomcat, ZT, and Undertow. So, no external deployment is needed. Just one command run your application. Okay. What is Spring? What is application.properties? So, this file handle all external configurations like data credentials, logging, and server port, and so on. So mention these help usability across environments. Next, what is Spring Profile? So profile allow you to switch configurations between dev environment, test environment, or QA, UAT, or any production environment easily. Example, let's suppose as we are a developers, we are using a S2 database. Let's suppose real customer, they will use, I use as a production MySQL credentials. So easily we can switch by using this Spring Profile. Okay. Next, what is dependency injection? So dependency injection is how we are going to create the object. So Spring Boot automatically will inject any of this dependency injection. Okay. Constructor injection is preferred because it improves testability and immutability. Got it? Next, what is inversion of control, IOC? So Spring handle objects creation, not the developers. So we are not going to worry about how the objects are created. Got it? This is called inversion of control, a core principle. Just remember. Okay. Now, what is at the rate component, at the rate service versus at the rate repository? So at the rate repository handles database logics and exception translations. At the rate service is for business logic, and at the rate component is for general bean creations. Okay. What is REST controller? So REST controller used for REST API and automatically converts responses to JSON. Mention the difference from @controller, and it is a combination of @controller and @response port. Got it? Now, what is the difference between @controller and @rest controller? So @controller uses for Spring MVC apps, and @rest controller uses for APIs. Got it? Now, at the rate request mapping. So at the rate request mapping, so map state request to methods. So either you can use inside this at the rate request mapping, you can use any several HTTP methods like get mapping, post mapping, put mapping, and delete mapping, and so on. These are the upper version of request mapping. Okay. Now, what is path variable versus request param? So path variable is part of the URL path, and request param is a query param, always gives example. Got it? Now, what is at the rate AutoWare? So at the rate AutoWare injects dependencies automatically. So constructor injection is preferred here. Okay. Now, what is at the rate qualifier? So, at qualifier is used when we have a multiple bin exist and our Spring Boot is trying to create the object. So here qualifier annotation is just distinguish the multiple bins with the same type. Okay. Next, what is configuration and bin? So let's suppose you are creating your own configuration classes. So how you are defining is by using @bin annotation and like public a some method name, then inside the method you are returning like return new and object is class name, right? Similarly, let's suppose I am taking one example of predefined REST template. Let's suppose you created one REST template. You are going to create the object of REST template. Just inside the configuration class, you can just define this as a @bin. Okay. Now, what is REST? So REST is a stateless. So every request is treated as a new request. It is not going to save in the cache. Okay, and it is a client to server, and it uses a HTTP methods. Okay, now what is REST controller? Let's suppose in interview they'll ask, can you write a one simple REST controller class? So just in interview, just you can write this is the code snippet @REST controller in your class. Inside your class, you can just define one get mapping. Okay, now what is Spring Boot actuator? So Spring Boot actuator basically it's monitor our application in production. So you can use any of the actuator methods, okay, just to monitor production. Now, what is Spring Boot DevTools? So it is auto restart or live reload or faster DevTools. Okay, what is exception handling? So exception handling basically you are using to handle the exception globally. Let's suppose you have a one some piece of code and you want to handle, okay, using the Clover handler. So you can use this annotation @exception handler and @controller advice. And this global exception handling reduces repetitive code. Okay. Now, what is response entity? This is full control over HTTP response. So, how you're going to provide the custom responses or a status or headers or body. Now, what is CORS? So, CORS basically is a cross origin resource sharing. So why this term? So when this is a common interview question and generally will face in our real-time application while we are working front-end or back-end application while you're interacting both. So from the front end, when you are trying to use the any host or pod, so you need to define in backend server using the cross origin annotation, and inside origin you need to provide the path of your front-end application. Okay, and sometime I see most of them not able to find out where generally we'll see this error. So just open your browser, go to network tab or go to console, just check the cross origin is so while you are working both for integrating with front-end with back-end applications. Now, Spring Security. This is the major part of our application development. So we don't want our REST APIs to expose publicly. Okay, so we need to handle through security. So we have a both authentication and authorization. So authentication basically we are providing the user access using username and password, and authorization stored inside the REST APIs. Who can access it? Just we need to provide some authorizations to the persons. Okay, or you can use few annotations. You can tell like @web security. Okay, most popular in interviews they will ask which implementation have you done while you are working or while you are securing your application. So you can tell I have used JWT, JSON Web Token based. Okay, so if you want to learn JWT internal how we are going to implement it, so I am going to prepare one separate video on that. Okay, now what is microservice? This is the common interview question nowadays. It's popular because it's independent services and we can scale independently, right? And we can build our applications independently, so it's a no dependency, right? Now, why Spring Boot for microservices? Okay, because each service runs independently on a dynamic port, and due to this, it's a lightweight and cloud ready, right? In interviews, they will ask which database you are using, which mechanism you are using to implement your database logic. So you can say I have used Data JPA to simplify the DB access and repository patterns. So I have created one interface which is extend from JPA repository, and inside you can just provide your whatever your model class name and the attribute name. Okay, Hibernate. So this is one of the ORM framework and maps objects to table. So this is nowadays little bit older. So all are moved to the Spring Boot Data JPA. Okay, you can say in interviews. Okay, now what is the JPA versus Hibernate? So JPA is a specification and Hibernate is an implementation. And how you are going to create one entity class, just you can define at the rate entity and at the rate table. So this maps class to our tables. Now JPA repository. So JPA repository is provided few cloud operations and no SQL is needed. Now what is lazy versus eager loading? So lazy is on demand. When we are going to create the objects, so we can define it anything you want to save it. Just use this lazy mechanism. Eager, if you want to do something before loading, just you can go for eager loading. Okay, now what is at the rate transactional? So at the rate transactional, basically we are using to manage our transaction. Let's suppose you are doing something shopping, and while you are doing the shopping, let's suppose your transaction got failed, so I want to roll back everything, right? And so this is, and it's also support a rollback mechanism. Okay, what is n plus one problem? This is also one of the most top interview question. Okay, so multiple queries issue. So while you are working multiple queries, generally this problem you will face. So basically use this join. Okay, now what is at the rate query? This is a custom JPQL provided one of the annotations. What is pagination? Okay, so while if you want to display 20 or 30 records in one page, you can go for pagination concept. So already in our Spring Boot provided Spring Data JPA, you have the predefined classes. Okay, you can just use them and you can implement and logging. So this is basically we are using the logging to track our application end to end, where it got failed and why the app is not working as expected. So by using this logging, you can track your entire application. The by default is a logback, or you can use for log.j2 as well. Now external configurations. So like suppose we are working on any microservice application, we have a lot of configuration. So you can manage in properties files and environment variables. Now Spring Boot CLI. This is CLI, we can run our applications quickly, and it is a Groovy support as well. Now secure your REST API. In interviews, they will ask how you are securing your REST APIs. You can say I'm using any of the mechanism, whatever you have did. Don't tell everything, whatever you know, just go forward. So in my project, I'm using a Spring Security, or in my project, I'm using a JWT or OR2. Just tell one thing, whatever you have used in your project. Now, what is now Docker plus Spring Boot? So let's suppose you have done your deployment. Now you want to containerization. Okay. So simply you can deploy, or you can create your Docker images for easy deployment. Okay. So how you're going to create a Docker images? Okay. How you're going to post into Docker? So if you want to really want this session, definitely just comment in comment section. So I'll give you one real-time implementation how we can do containerization and easy deployment and how we can push to Docker Hub as well. Clear? Now CI/CD pipeline. So CI/CD pipelines, it's useful. So you have built your application, you did the containerization, now you want to deploy into Docker Hub. So you don't need to do a manual job, right? So you can define a scripts in Jenkins or you can use the GitHub provided GitHub actions to minimize the CI/CD pipelines. Okay. Now API versioning. Let's suppose you are working on REST APIs. Sometime you need to define the versioning as well. Let's suppose you have wrote one API with V1 and that is deprecated and you want to go for any next version. So you can just differentiate using the V2. So this is just naming convention as per your project implementation. You can choose any name or you can use the header list as well. Okay. Now let's suppose you have developed it and whether your REST APIs is working as expected or not. Okay, now you need to write the unit test case as well, right? So unit test case basically it's defining how your code is testable. Okay, how much you can test it. So Spring Boot is provided with the annotations. Okay, at the rate Spring Boot text test. Okay, using this class you can define and you can write as much as unit test is possible, both positive and negative scenarios. Now why Spring Boot is industry standard? Because it's a faster development, we save lot of time and it's a scalable and strong ecosystem. So congratulations, if you watched till here, you are interview ready. Like this video, subscribe and comment Spring if you want a mock interview videos or if you want anything in real scenarios. If you are not able to understand it, let me comment in the comment section or you can directly DM. Okay, so I'll just go through it and I'll prepare most clear in detail video. So thanks for watching. See you in next one.